What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Viva Nutrition Radio. This is your host, Andres Ayesta, registered dietitian, and I'm excited to talk to you guys one more time. This is actually just me today. There's a lot of things that happened over the past week or so, especially here in the state of Florida where I live in. I live in Tampa, if you guys didn't know that. But I think it's relevant to many people, whether you live in the United States or you live out abroad, because we're obviously dealing with a big issue when it comes down to legislature and the laws when it comes down to understanding, like, to what standards us registered dietitians are being held accountable versus people that are just providing nutrition advice out there. So I wanted to actually come on here and kind of rant a little bit. I did it on my Instagram, and Instagram for some reason started like flickering and I couldn't finish it, and I was a little routed up a little bit too. So I figured I would just like calm on my podcast, do a little more calmly with a lot more facts in front of me, and to kind of talk a little bit about this new legislation that was just passed in the state of Florida in regards to the legality of people providing nutrition advice and when it's something that people can do normally. So I wanted to just kind of like come in here and actually do this. Like, obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see me actually speaking in directly into you. Possibly you may all be hearing this on iTunes or Google Play. So yeah. In case you don't know who I am a full-time registered dietitian. I am a nutrition coach, and I established this company called Viva Nutrition, which what it does is it kind of helps people improve the relationship with food, like obviously accomplish whatever goals that they have. Mostly fat loss is who I worked with the most, and I went to school for this, and that's the reason why I wanted to come in here and talk about it. And you've probably heard me speak about this topic in the past with Antonio Castillo. He's a registered dietitian, Desi Abeda, and Nate Diaz. But today I wanted to talk to you guys about the specific legislature that was just, again, passed in the state of Florida. So before we get into that, let's actually understand what the differences that exist between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist or a nutrition coach or a health coach and all those different things like that. Because I feel like if we start with definitions, we can certainly start to explain some of the differences that exist between both options. So a registered dietitian is somebody that went to school for this. So typically, let me actually walk you through the requirements to become a registered dietitian. You have to complete 4 years in a 4-year college degree, and you need to get a bachelor's in a specific health or a health specific area, and you also need to have completed something called DPD. So it's the didactic program in dietetics. That's what that stands for, which is essentially something that is accredited by this massive organization that is overseen by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the United States, and it's called the Commission of Dietetic Registration. So essentially, they're in charge of overseeing curriculums to make sure that universities and colleges have the right information and they're providing the right education when it comes down to building or creating new registered dietitians. So essentially, not just going to school for nutrition, but you have to go to a didactic program in dietetics. Interestingly enough, let me tell you a story. When I was living in Venezuela, which is a complete different thing, I was going to school for nutrition because I wanted to be a doctor. Maybe in the past you've heard me talk about this. Maybe you haven't. But I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to pursue my career in medicine, specifically working with sports and athletes. Now, of course, I didn't get into med school. That's a long story. But I started nutrition school. And back in Venezuela, that school is part of the same faculty of medicine. It's essentially like med school has a bunch of different like health or health professions that are part still of the same faculty. They have their own kind of governmental like kind of things, but they all respond to kind of like the main med school board or whatever. So anyways, I started my schooling there. I did 3 semesters until I decided that I wanted to transfer because I thought my opportunities was going to be better here in the United States. So I came here and I got a scholarship into a University of Southern Indiana, and go Eagles, by the way. And it's a small D2 school in the middle of Indiana and Evansville. So when I got there and I spoke with my advisor, she told me that they were in the process of becoming accredited by CDR, or the Commission of Dietetic Registration, to actually become, or being able to provide the seal that you could become a registered dietitian. So anyways, that was like a crazy time, because I was like, oh my God, like I came to a school that I don't even know if I'm going to be able to fulfill my dream to become a dietitian, because at the end of the day, long story short, I didn't become a doctor, I became a dietitian. Anyways, you had to complete 4 years in a DPD program. That, when you complete to a DPD program, what that gives you is the seal of approval, so you can apply for a dietetic internship, which is 1,200 hours of supervised practice that needs to be entailing like things like clinical nutrition, so working in a hospital, understanding basic metabolic, conditions, tube feedings, what's the other thing? I always forget. I haven't done my clinical nutrition in a long time. Tube feedings and TPNs, which are total parenteral nutrition, which is when you're being fed by a needle, and all these different things that are super important knowledge that we need to have as registered dietitians. So we had to complete 1,200 hours of supervised practice. Now, granted, 40 to 50% of people that actually apply to these internships are the only ones that kind of get in. There's another 40 to 50% because there's an extremely competitive process, and there's not that many people that can kind of go into these fields. So it's a long duration to kind of get to that point. Now, if you're lucky enough to be matched to a dietetic internship, then you have to complete your 1,200 hours of supervised practice, which can last anywhere between 7 months up to a year, sometimes even 2. There are programs that are part of like combined, so they do like the undergrad, the master's, they do everything all together. Mine wasn't. I went to the University of Houston, and I actually practiced nutrition, or I did complete my dietetic internship in the Texas Medical Center, which is a very prestigious medical center, and I did all kinds of things, from working in a research facility, Baylor University. I did also complete some rotations in Bentop, which is a massive county hospital, and you saw the craziest things in there. They have like 1 million ICUs, and I worked in each one of them. And I also completed rotations in places like cardiac facilities and rehab facilities, and at the same time also renal facilities as well. I did, obviously, that's where I got my interest in sports nutrition, because I did rotations also with the University of Houston Athletics Department. So why am I telling you all this? Because I did a whole lot to be able to actually have my certification, because once you complete your 1,200 hours of supervised practice, then essentially they give you okay, you completed this, now you can go and take your board examination exam, which is essentially a massive test. It's like 3 to 4 hours in duration, in which they're essentially testing you for everything you know and everything you have learned, not only from clinical, but also from sports, but also from everything. It's like a general exam. Registered dietitians are held to the same standards similar to registered nurses and physical therapists and all these different health, or they call it health allied professions. So we are held by those standards to become or to have the RD. So that process took closer to 6 years. After that, I went in to get my master's in exercise science and physiology, and at the same time I completed 1,200 hours in actual practice of practicing nutrition within sports, so I can sit for a board examination exam, which would specialize me in specifically to work with athletes, or it's basically called CSSD, which is Certified Specialist in Sports Dietetics. That entire process has taken me closer to 8 to 10 years. So granted, a long time. Why am I telling you all this? Because that's what a registered dietitian needs to do to be, in order for them to have what they have, to have the letters after the name and the credentials to be able to practice. Now, a nutritionist or somebody that just have a certification, let me tell you what that is. You're not required to have a college degree. Some certifications actually ask you to. In the cases that you do, you don't even have to have a college degree in the specific topic, which is nutrition, that you actually are getting the certification on. Some cases you do. After that, you essentially have to get the materials, which you have to pay some company for, which obviously that's what they get benefit from. And then second of all, once you kind of get all the materials, you just simply go and take a test. If you pass the test, you become, or you have a certification in nutrition, and that kind of gives you or grants you, according to specific or certain states, the ability to be able to provide nutrition advice. Now, here's where the gray area becomes, and this is the biggest issue, and I'm going to talk about this new law. So essentially 47 states, now 46, but up to like last week, 47 states actually have licensure laws in the states in which people were in. So essentially what this means is that you had to become a licensed dietitian. Not only become a registered dietitian, but at the same time, you had to apply for a license in the state that you were practicing on in order for you to be able to provide individualized, personalized nutrition, like nutrition guidance. Personalized nutrition guidance. So 47 states to this date, up until last week, had that stuff in place. That means only 8 states in the entire country didn't have those limitations, which means that a registered dietitian and a nutritionist or somebody with a certification, there wasn't really a whole lot of difference. Like, you can listen to advice from most people regardless of the situation, right? So now Florida became one of those, well, now 9 states in which the licensure laws have been completely evaporated. So essentially they say that as long as you don't have a medical condition or you're not being treated under medical supervision, anybody, and I'm going to repeat this, anybody can provide basic nutrition guidance. This is known as the Occupational Freedom and Opportunity Act, HB 1193, and that actually was passed in the state of Florida by Governor Ron DeSantis. So essentially what this means is, again, and let me tell you why this actually was passed, because this is passed under the umbrella of a bunch of all different professions. It's not just for dietetics, it's not for nutrition, but the only health professions that actually fell under this umbrella, from what I understand, it's only nutrition. Basically saying that we need to give opportunity for people to learn, or that's obviously their premise. We need to give, obviously, opportunity for other people to establish businesses and to continue to educate without being held to some specific standards that they can't do nutrition advice that is personalized. And I'm going to talk very in depth into some of those different things. What's the problem with this? The problem with this is that there's no control. Why was this law passed? And let me tell you the reasoning behind it. So I think there was a person, I think it's a owner of a CrossFit gym. I forget the name of her. I think it was, I'm looking to see the article so I can make a better assessment of everything. But on a CrossFit gym owner who also happens to have, and again, this facts may not be completely correct, may actually, but she had a CrossFit gym, and I think she also had a nutrition company, so that essentially was providing nutrition advice. And somebody probably reported her to the health board and said this person is providing nutrition advice, and that she's not a registered dietitian. So I think she got fined something along the lines of $750 for providing personalized nutrition advice when she was not supposed to, and she was also threatened with time in jail and all these different things, right? So why was this important? Because, of course, she sued the state and saying, this is not right and blah, 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 whatever. So let me actually give you the specifics on here. So Heather Kokesh Del Castillo. In May 2017, Del Castillo was subject to a sting operation conducted by the Dietetics and Nutrition Practice Council, which fined her $750 for the unlicensed practice of dietetics due to her provision of individualized dietary advice. In October 2017, Del Castillo challenged the fine in federal court. The suit is currently in the appeal of the 11th U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals. And essentially, this was an article actually I was published in CrossFit Inc., which is actually the biggest problem. And I'm going to tell you why, because I love CrossFit. I do CrossFit, and I was so disappointed by the response that CrossFit had upon this, because essentially she is supposedly a CrossFit trainer. She's a health coach, and she was just so upset about the fact of everything that was happening, right? So, of course, because of all this pressure mounted into the state and this all the politics and all these different things, governor actually passed a law and said, you know what, I don't think we need to punish people that are health coaches and they know about nutrition because they can educate people on this specific topic, as long as they're not under the care of a medical or under medical supervision or have a medical condition. Of course, because the suit actually came from a CrossFit coach, CrossFit took that into that and called it a victory. They said basically this is a massive victory for CrossFit because now CrossFit coaches I quote, like CrossFit coaches now have the ability, I'm like literally going to read this, in a significant victory for CrossFit affiliates on June 30th, 2020, Governor DeSantis signed, blah, 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 permitting CrossFit trainers. It wasn't really saying CrossFit trainers were permitted to this. They basically, CrossFit took this into their own words and said, permitting CrossFit trainers across the state to provide nutrition guidance to their members and clients. Previously, Florida law only permitted dietitians and other selected licensed professionals to provide nutrition recommendations to their clients. This is completely wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm not against non-registered dietitians to provide nutrition advice. In fact, I have voiced that many times, and I looked up to a lot of friends of mine that I wouldn't necessarily call them colleagues because we're not their dietitians, but we're still practice within the same field, and they know their shit. They know their nutrition, and they know how to coach somebody. Not all registered dietitians are great coaches. Not all great coaches, or not all coaches are registered dietitians. Let me put it that way. Not all dietitians, not all registered dietitians, and I'm not trying to bash my profession. I'm just simply talking the specifics and the law or not the law, but the facts. Not all registered dietitians are great coaches. Not all great registered dietitians are great at actually giving personalized nutrition advice, specifically for people and in general populations. There's dietitians that belong to the clinical setting, and they belong into hospitals, and they're really good at doing that. The problem is many people are actually trying to put all those dietitians within the same bucket. These are people that need to be, or they're used for specifically for medical populations, which is far from right. We're taught in specific courses and topics within motivational interviewing, which is something that a CrossFit coach I have no idea about, right? Because typically a CrossFit coach has a level 1 certification. In a level 1 certification, there's only a booklet on a block diet that is given to them at the very beginning whenever they start their process, and they get tested on this specific topic as part of their certification that they complete in 1 weekend. 1 weekend. So remember what I was telling you back like in a few like minutes ago, how I went 8 years into like studying and taking test after test and supervised practice and all these different things. You can actually become sort of like a CrossFit coach. I'm not against that. I think that they're definitely like merit into that. But now you're saying that this CrossFit trainer also can provide nutrition advice with just a little part of it, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of CrossFit coaches that are going to take that to heart. And they're going to say, oh, there's a nutrition piece in the level 1 certification, so now I can teach people about nutrition. That is completely wrong. And I'm going to tell you more reasons for this. Because again, perception, like one of the things that I think it was, what's it called? My friend, I forgot who it was that mentioned. I actually completely lost my train of thought. But honestly, what I was just trying to kind of mention in here is that it's really difficult to establish who has medical conditions, who is under medical supervision, and how do you determine somebody's giving actual really good nutrition advice. There was a discussion on the unconventional RD group, and then there's this dietitian, I think her name is Alexia RD, I believe, and she did have actually some really interesting points as far as that this is not a big deal, and there she had a really interesting article called "Perception as a Reality," as far as how we are perceived as registered dietitians, because not all dietitians are great. That's just the reality of it. There's dietitians that really do not need to be stepping onto health coaching, for example, because they're just not that good at it. They could maybe be specifically focused on other kinds of areas. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's say, for example, you have, now kind of changing gears here, you have a really bad shoulder or like a low back issue, low back problem. And let's say you wanted to go to a chiropractor, right? And then the state in which you're in, you go to a licensed chiropractor. Or let's say you go to a physical therapist. Those people need to have a license. They need to have a specific training in order for you to do that. Or for them to be able to do an adjustment, for example, or for them to do specific or use specific machinery as part of the physical therapy office. If out of the blue, the governor of your state said, you know what, if you don't have a medical problem, if your low back issue is something and you're part of you're not really under medical supervision, but just something that is not too bad, you can now go to a trainer And a trainer, if they complete, well, not even, like they can give you some general guidance on how to treat your own low back problems, which I'm sure there's people doing this, or can do adjustments on you, basic ones or something like that. I'm just gonna try to use something similar language, or provide or do specific kinds of physical therapy, because now we need to give opportunity for these individuals to be able to help others as long as they are not under medical supervision or they don't have a medical issue. So again, I have a low back issue. I'm not under any kind of medical supervision. I don't have a low back kind of chronic problem. I just have low back pain because I hurt myself really like doing a deadlift. I have no idea because I haven't gotten tested. So I decided to go to this person that now it's a pseudo chiropractor or a pseudo physical therapist or somebody that is providing me advice, making adjustments. I mean, does that even make sense to you? Like, does it even make sense to do those kinds of things? It doesn't. It's completely bogus. Same thing as, for example, oh, you have a cold, a flu. You can maybe go to this person that can provide some medical recommendations, as long as it's not something too bad, as long as you don't really have an underlying medical problem here. Like, you can go to this person that completes some training. He's not a doctor, but he completed some certifications that allowed him to give you some general advice. It's the same thing with nutrition, but I don't understand how people don't necessarily see it to the same level of gravity as far as like, oh, this is what you put in your body. It's not even like a topical, it's not even like a cream. It's like literally something how you're fueling your body accordingly. And don't get me wrong, there's people that are really smart. They're not dietitians that are doing amazing things. And I'm gonna quote a lot of them again, like Sim Miller. It's a guy like I looked up to a lot of times to him, and because he knows his stuff and he knows how to coach somebody. People like, for example, Paul Revelia, that he works with a lot of bikini competitors and stuff like that. He knows how to coach somebody. He's not a dietitian. William Grazione, and a bunch of other people that know how to level up with somebody and help them create an illicit change. And they all also understand their boundaries. They also understand a lot of the limitations by which they're actually kind of like bound to. Like, these are people that, sure, like they can practice and they can provide amazing results to people. However, it's so hard to determine that like, how do you determine when somebody's good and when somebody's like maybe not so good? How do you determine that? Because there's not a certification now. Now the state just basically said, hey, listen, you can go and practice nutrition. You can go and provide nutritional advice as long as that person is not under medical supervision. How do you know that? As a CrossFit trainer, if you're listening to this, or somebody that goes to a CrossFit gym, like if you go to your trainer and you tell him, let's say like you have an eating disorder and you're ashamed of it and you don't like to disclose it, but you really want nutrition advice, and you join this nutrition challenge in your gym and you're receiving this personalized nutrition advice because your friend is doing it too, but you just simply don't want to disclose that. And you get kind of like, lured into this nutrition program, and what it does is kind of starts to like mess up like mentally again, because it's a keto program, for example, because a CrossFit trainer believes that ketogenic diets are the way to be the healthiest that you can be, because she read an article, she did a certification, right? And then you're just like completely ruined the relationship that you have with carbohydrates, and now you just have all these kinds of issues that are a result of it, because you never disclose the fact that you have an eating disorder. Or maybe you were pre-diabetic and you didn't know about it. You're not on the medical supervision, mainly because you don't have insurance, yet you receive nutrition advice from this person, even though she didn't know or he didn't know that you had a medical condition. Again, like those are the reasons why we have to have those specific like filters in order for us to understand how or when somebody's doing something like this, or somebody like, or what are the red flags. One of the things about dietitians is we are trained to do a proper nutrition assessment. A nutrition assessment is a series of questions, whether it's done through a questionnaire or an actual consultation, in which we ask a patient or clients a ton of questions about their background, so we better understand how are they feeling. We're also trained how to evaluate lab data. Like that nutrition assessment gives us an understanding of where is that person at, whether that person is healthy or not healthy. You want to see a proper solution for this kind of thing, so we can at least like say, you know what, you're clear. You can actually go and see, or you can listen to advice from somebody else. Going through a screening process before you can receive nutrition advice from somebody else. It's kind of like a doctor, like, okay, I'm going to screen you first. Like, okay, you can be taken care of by the nurse practitioner because they can do some basic medical stuff. That's the difference. See, because there's a screening process that kind of goes through, but that doesn't exist anymore, or it's never existed anyways. Which is obviously being held liable to a specific standard and told people, hey, you need to see a registered dietitian just in case, right? One of the things about this article that Alexia Lewis, RD, she actually wrote another article that basically is read, Perception is Reality. And she went on a Facebook community for CrossFitters and she asked, what are your thoughts on registered dietitians? And she basically said that she did like a poll, like, oh, how many people were this and blah, blah, blah. And there were about 25% or 33% positive opinions, 21% neutral or no opinions, and then 46% negative opinions. And then in negative opinions, I actually started reading the entire article because she literally posted it. Obviously, like, there was a lot of things that were in there of things that I looked and I was like, that's terrible. That's a terrible registered dietitian. Like, for example, I had to see a registered dietitian when I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. The simple meal plans were so bunk. Like, I have milk and orange juice with each meal and do Jello or 7 grades, pure silliness for blood sugar control. It was super unhelpful and found better information online. Yeah, this is an example of just like you went to a bad accountant or you went to like a second opinion because the first doctor that you went to was terrible. That's exactly what that is. You have to do your due diligence and you have to find somebody that works, somebody that knows and understands nutrition. You have to do your research before you decide to go, I need to see. We're not all the same. We don't have all the same credentials. We didn't go to the same schools. Just like the different accountants don't have the same background. You may actually hire an accountant, completely ruins you, and then like at the end of the day when you do your taxes, you have to pay $10,000 because your accountant actually messed up. That doesn't mean you're going to listen to your CrossFit trainer actually to help you do your taxes. You're just simply going to find another accountant. It's the same thing when it comes down to nutrition. You found a bad registered dietitian? Not all bad registered dietitians are bad. Or not all registered dietitians are bad. It just means that obviously the one that you went to was not good. That's a problem. Now, there are some comments here. Some people actually went to like 2 and 3, and they all have like terrible. I've seen 3 different RDs, and none of them listened. All 3 told me to eat things that I'm allergic to, and also I needed to follow a low oxalate diet to my body not process things correctly, and they never listened to any of those different things. I'm sorry to hear those bad opinions. Like, it's terrible. But obviously, that just also means that you may have not done your due diligence before you hire them. The other thing too is like dietitians are health professional, and so sometimes actually the ones that you can see are the ones that are covered by your insurance. And I'm not going to be bashing on my profession, but not all dietitians are good at what they at health coaching, at helping you actually achieve and improve your relationship with food or improve your nutrition outcomes. It's taken me a long time to learn how to do that myself. Right? I have failed many different times, and maybe there's a times a person may have said, hey, I went to this dietitian, Andres, and he didn't really kind of give me great advice because, yes, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, nutrition school and like the academia and the way that we're brought up as far as that, there's a lot of old school stuff in there. If you know me, you probably would hear me talk about how I support ketogenic diets for specific purposes or that I practice intermittent fasting. I am a registered dietitian, and most people would say, oh, don't ask registered dietitians about that because they're all against it. The school of thought that it's ingrained as far as like the academia, sure, they're going to always go against it, but it doesn't mean that I can actually educate myself. I have the credentials and I have all the background to support on top of everything that I know, that information that is helpful. That is like the one thing that a CrossFit trainer is not going to be able to help you. Again, I do CrossFit. I actually have a partnership with a CrossFit gym here in Tampa, and actually multiple, Forever Young CrossFit in Orlando, StarFit in Mount Dora, and at the same time CrossFit Big Guava here in Tampa. We all have great relationships, and they know what their boundaries are. They know what their limitations are. That is the key thing here. They don't try to like actually step on somebody's lane because they know what the liability of that can represent. Now there's gyms that don't have that, and now they're being waiting, like for example, some of those that have like the moral or legal compass that now this law is passed. It's like, oh, you know what? I can now provide nutrition advice. So you go and complete a certification and you think that you have everything it takes in order for you to be able to provide nutrition advice. Now here's the thing I want to leave you with. I'm all about people educating on nutrition because we need more people to improve that. I believe in preventive medicine. I believe nutrition is the best way that you can actually reduce the incidence of diseases, chronic conditions, and all these different things. The way that you fuel your body, the way that you do all these different things. So more education is needed. But personalized education is a complete different monster. And with this law was passed, now you're given the opportunity, or you're given you're opening up like the floodgates on the opportunity for people to provide nutrition guidance that is personalized without understanding without any kind of repercussion. So now we cannot sue somebody because they actually provide bad nutrition advice. You have no idea how many times I've heard horror stories, and it's usually more horror stories from people that are not RDs or the ones that are RDs, because I've heard horror stories from RDs as well. This is not to go and say, don't see somebody that is not an RD, but do your due diligence. Ask your CrossFit trainer, what is your background? Like, what kind of certifications do you have? Where did you learn nutrition? What did you go to school for? Like, all those things. Have you coached people in the past? How do you know if I don't have a medical condition? Well, because you're going to tell me, well, how are you going to determine that? Be an informed consumer, because the more questions that you ask, the better is it going to be for you to hire the right person. Some of the people that follow me on my Instagram channels that listen to this podcast, they don't even work with me for months and sometimes years. Like, they see me, they understand me, they see all my content, but it's not until months later that they decide to make a leap. Those people, I love working with them because they understand. They have seen my content for a long time. They've nourished themselves with enough information to be able to understand what is the difference between a dietitian or this guy and everybody else with or whatever everybody else is doing. I'm not here to self-promote myself, but I do consider myself to be a great damn nutrition coach because I have worked hard for it, not only to become a dietitian, but also to become a good coach. So that is the difference. And with this law, because obviously this person also talked in this article, it's also about the perception. It's simply related to, focus on playing defense, and nutrition license laws, blah, blah. We should stop wasting resources, time, and money as fighting attacks on nutrition license laws. The nutrition, yes, sure. Competition is good for us all. I agree. It makes us all very creative and grow. You feel the needs for the public. Yes. This is a call for all registered dietitians out there that this is your time for you to shine, friend. But to shine in the right way. Stop giving nutrition cookie cutter programs. That's actually what we fight against. Start believing in personalized nutrition advice. Start actually getting more educated on how to do proper health coaching. All registered dietitians should be able to now understand how to do proper coaching. How to not necessarily just give a cookie cutter meal plan, or just simply actually learn how to actively listen to your individuals, because you have the credentials not only to help coach somebody, but at the same time understand all the underlying kind of issues that they may have, so other people cannot take your spot and place and possibly cause something worse or something bad. And for all lawmakers and for all registered voters, you have to when you go to the polls, you always have to vote for somebody that supports professions, licenses and those kinds of things like that, as long as they actually have proper laws in place. If you're actually going to open up the floodgates like that to say anybody can now provide nutrition advice as long as the person doesn't have medical conditions, then try to find somewhere in the middle. You went from black to white in there's no in between. There's no screenings, no nothing. So obviously, this is something that creates a lot of problem. And then when you have an organization that has so much voice, such as CrossFit, and they take that they take ownership of that and says now CrossFit trainers. Nobody said anything about the law, and the bill doesn't say anything about CrossFit trainers. They just simply say anybody that or people that don't have a nutrition. Not even, they just say basically non-registered dietitians that call themselves nutritionists or whatever. They're able to now do so. That's all that thing said. That's exactly what the difference is. So you have to be careful. Be an informed consumer. And before you go and listen to your CrossFit trainer or personal trainer's nutrition advice, ask yourself, am I doing my due diligence to understand if this person knows what they're talking about? Just because somebody is jacked doesn't mean that they know jack shit. Keep that in mind. I said that last week on my Instagram, and I think a lot of people resonated with it. So just because somebody looks good, somebody is strong, somebody is that, just because something works for them doesn't mean it works for you. Just because somebody read a research article doesn't necessarily mean that that person is automatically more knowledgeable than you. Keep those things in mind. We went to school for a long time to become the authority, the experts in this field. Doesn't mean that we'll all are. And if you run into a bad registered dietitian or somebody that give you bad advice and you had a bad experience and you're listening to this podcast, talk to me first. and ask me, how do I practice my nutrition? So you'll understand the difference that it makes from seeing a good registered dietitian from somebody that is not. Keep that in mind. Not all registered dietitians not all are bad apples. Just like you're going to find a bad doctor, a bad accountant, a bad mechanic, there's always going to be also bad registered dietitians. You just need to find the right ones, and you need to do your research with that. Keep that in mind. If you have any questions about this, I would love to hear your opinion. If you're a registered dietitian or a nutrition coach and would like to have a conversation, even come on the podcast to share your views, I'd be more than happy to invite you in. In the meantime, of course, if you have anything else that you wanted to add, feel free to reach out directly on my Instagram or all my social media channels, and I'll be more than happy to have a conversation. Until then, I'll see you guys next week on another episode of Even Nutrition Radio. Have a great one.